to RGES Algebra 1. This is lesson 34A. Remember, we will not have a 34B, so it is the last tape of the year, and it is part 2. We are continuing with our final exam review, and we're starting now with our review of Chapter 11. And remember, the goal for you is when I'm going through this, I'm not reteaching everything, but I'm telling you all the types of problems you're going to run into on the final. So as you are listening, you want to make a note and say, whoops, I don't really remember that idea or that idea, and then go back to the chapter. That's the question, and the sections that's of the chapter that you have questions about. Now, we are going to now talk about looking at fractions. We call this rational equations, or the chapter on rational equations and expressions. The first thing I could do is I could have something like x plus 3 over x minus 4, and I could say evaluate if x equals -2, and I only have an x in this particular one, so I don't have a y, so that would be all I do. Let's take away that comma. And so remember, all you have to do for this is wherever you see an x, you'll plug in -2. So that becomes -2 plus 3, make sure you know your signs, -2 minus 4. -2 plus 3 is +1, -2 minus 4 is -6. We typically do not write a negative in the denominator, so that, whoa, why is that funny? So that is -1/6, and I usually write it in the numerator, or you could write it in front of both, but this is really probably a better pattern. For some different reasons I won't go into right now. Now, the next idea, you could be asked to factor and simplify. Let's say I have, all right, so if I were to ask you to factor, if you do that, you're not going to pass Algebra 1. I mean, I'm not going to test you on just that one thing, but you really won't be equipped to go on to Algebra 2 because you've missed the key point. Whenever we have an addition or a subtraction, we cannot cancel like that, only when we're multiplying. So never, never, never do that. Let's go back to the drawing board here. Do not do that. You can only cancel factors or things being multiplied together. So I have to go ahead and create things that are being multiplied together. And hopefully this will be binomial factoring. Let's say two numbers multiplied together to give me 12, and their sum is -7. Well, I could have a -3 and a -4. It'd be +12, so I'm good. Okay, and -7x for the two numbers multiplied together to give me a negative, so they'll have to have opposite signs. And if I have a 2 and a 3, oops, I didn't quite make a, when I'm making my problem, I don't really do it right, sorry. Okay, sorry, I get a little ahead of myself sometimes when I'm thinking through problems. So if I have a -3 and a +2, that would be x squared minus 3x plus 2x is -x, and -3 times 2 is 6. So there we go. That factors. Now what happens? These two can cancel. Why? Because they're being multiplied. They're factors. So this then becomes the answer to the question or the expression. Remember, if you have things like where you just have multipliers, you won't have to go through the binomial factoring, for instance, and this is a little easier for you. Let's say now these are already multipliers, so I just want to deal with this in 3 groups. Deal with division as a fraction, 12 goes into 36 1/3 time, right? We don't really need the 1 there if we're going to have anything else. So, whoops, I didn't have to take away everything. So this will be a 3 in the denominator because I'll end up with something else probably in the numerator. I won't just stick a 1 there. Looking at my x's, I have more in the denominator, 3 more. Looking at my y's, I have the more in the numerator, 1 more. And that's a fairly straightforward kind of problem. You'll have one of those. You might have something a little more complicated with division. Remember, to divide is to multiply by the reciprocal. You'll want to know how to do the least common multiple. I already reviewed that, as well as the greatest common factor. So I'm not going to review that again. To add or subtract fractions, what do you need? Common denominator. My common denominator will be 20x. I could stick it over one numerator, or I could just make it 2 fractions. It doesn't matter. Okay. So if 4x, I would need to multiply this by 5 to get 20x, 5 over 5, so that becomes 30. For 5x, I would need to multiply it by 4, so I need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator. 4 times 7 is 28. Add the numerators together. And that can divide by 2, and so I'm going to get 29 over 10x. So review that if you need to. Adding, subtracting, always a common denominator. Now, chapter 12, and the last thing we'll do here, chapter 12 is going to be extra credit. And we'll have 5 extra credit questions, and they'll all relate to the square root. Okay, so the first thing you could do is evaluate. That's the easiest thing to do, because remember, you do remember, I think, that the square root of 49 is 7. You're saying what times what? What times itself? What times the same thing? 7 times 7 is 49. Okay, and that's the positive or the principal square root. And I told you not to worry about the others. So now, if I have something like evaluate, let's say, x minus 11, the square root, if x equals 47. What would you do? Plug in square root of 47 minus 11. 47 minus 11 is 36. What's the square root of 36? 6. Okay. And you don't have to worry about the plus or minus there. We'll just talk about the principal square root. Let's keep going for a few more examples. Yeah, this is a good one. What if I have the square root of x plus 4 equals 7? To calculate it now, I have to square both sides. So, if I square that side, I'd square that side. That times, in other words, if I had square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that would equal 3. So the square root of x plus 4 times the square root of x plus 4 would equal x plus 4. 7 squared is 49. Subtract, and x equals 45. That's it. To simplify a larger square root, let's say I want to simplify 350. Make one of your trees like that you're used to, 35 and 10, 5 and 7, and 5 and 2. So that would be 2 times 5 times 5 times 7. Every time I have 2 of them, I can pull it out. So this would be 5 times, the rest of this doesn't simplify, so 2 times 7 is 14. Again, you can review this if you want to, because this will be extra credit. Okay, so you've got a choice. Now the other thing is, if I want to add or subtract with a square root or with roots, I need to have the same, if it's just square roots, I need to have the same number under, the same, we call it radicand. Otherwise, you cannot add or subtract them. So if I have 6, the square root of 3 minus 9, the square root of 2, plus 12, the square root of 3. The only two that can combine are these. This does not combine. Okay, so 6 plus 12 is 18, the square root of 3, minus 9, the square root of 2. And that's all you can do to simplify that. So this is a subset of the things we were learning in Chapter 12, but I did not want you to have to go too deeply into that chapter. So these would be extra credit. Now that is the sum total of the review for the final exam. I've touched on every kind of problem you will see. So if you have any sections that you're very confused about, you can text me and we can try to talk them through together. But other than that, just go to your section of the book and review those sections. I would expect that unless you really fell down on learning one of your chapters, your review for the final exam should probably not have to exceed an hour, 2 hours at the very most. For some of you, if all of these problems looked familiar and you knew how to approach them, then I would suggest maybe a 5-10 minute review. That's it. All right? So I'm trusting you all do well. Please know I'll be praying for you over the summer. Remember your dates. Don't mess them up, right? Okay, God bless you.